Well, good afternoon, good day, or good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another session of CFF Live. And today we have good afternoon, good day, or good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another session of CFF Live. And today we have, since I had to speak on, put this on mute, so otherwise it will go on. Thank you for joining us for another session of CFF Live. And I have to just speak once and then it will continue on. Well, that was interesting with the Zoom trying to talk to YouTube and YouTube trying to talk back to Zoom. Every day you learn something. How are you doing, Peter?
Let me add from perspective of the way I see technology. I always like to say, to err is human. If you really want to screw things up, you need a computer. So
of course, when they're supposed to help us and take care of us and all that, and now there is AI and all. Will obviously speak about all the implications, but. Peter, welcome to CFF Live. Great to have you. I think we've been planning on this for quite some time, and no better time than teeing up to the summit in October. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Val. I'm very excited to join you today, and of course, looking forward to the summit next month. I'm just positive it's going to be another superb program with great speakers and great discussion from people all over the world. So glad to be a part of it once again.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you. And as for those who are not used to seeing me in this costume for the last 6 months now, it feels a little bit different. But thanks to Peter, we wanted to make sure that we reflect each other's dress code.
No, Val, and for the audience, let me say this: I'm a lawyer, and half of what I do is trial, and so I think the costume of wearing what I wear in court kind of makes me feel at home. And that's kind of why I told Val I was going to do this. So he felt compelled to join me.
No, so thanks for giving me the option to go back to my wardrobe and check if I got anything left.
We're not asking about blue jeans or shorts. We'll just leave it.
Oh, no, but I'm missing the hat. I think, that was that was another essential element, right? But we leave it outside.
I'm happy to take a second and go get it if you want, but I don't think it's that.
Well, let's maybe that's the closing act. But for the opening act, again, Peter, it's great to have you. It's been a great pleasure to be collaborating, working with you again, learning a lot, learned a lot from us, and I do miss Harold. He's by the way, he's in the audience, so we'll
good
the chance to come speak in.
Glad he's in the audience. Sorry he's not on as well.
You will be. I was just not sure. Let's talk about a little bit about your journey. You have an incredible background, and I have to highlight, for a lawyer of your pedigree, having a Master of Computer Science, give us Masters of Computer Science and engineers a little bit of chip on the shoulder to make sure that we got somewhere right in life.
Well, it's funny how I got in the computer industry to begin with, because when I was a student at the University of Texas years ago in the business school, everyone had to take statistics. And the first half of statistics was Fortran programming. Well, that was all I needed. Yeah, that dates me a lot with punch cards too. But I guess what happened was I found that terribly exciting. And then I had a career on IBM mainframes and worked, among other places, for LTB Aerospace in the Dallas area. Spent some time in the Army, ended up in Washington, D.C. at the National Institutes of Health. And I got a master's in computer science at American University. I went back to the University of Texas to work on a PhD and just really hated it because none of my professors had ever worked. And I thought, that's not quite it. And I'd always been fascinated by law. So I went to law school, actually not planning to be a lawyer. My plan was I was going to do computer consulting. I saw the JD to be like an MBA on steroids. So I taught graduate and undergraduate computer courses all through law school. And when I got out, I moved back to Dallas, which is my hometown, and did computer consulting for a couple of years. And then after a while, my clients asked me to represent them as a lawyer. So I just hung up a shingle, and I was a sole practitioner for 14 years. And now I'm with Foley and Lardner these days. Our firm combined a couple of years ago with Gardier Winsewell in Dallas. But in any event, in my law practice, I have only ever represented buyers and sellers of information technology and internet services. And cyber's been something I've been involved with forever. As a matter of fact, a cyber forensic investigator last year asked me how long I've been involved in cyber. And I started laughing because I said, I have no idea, because it never had a name. It would just all of a sudden, the computer would be completely dark. We figure, how did that happen? What do we do? How do we recover? You know, beside the ransomware attacks, but things like that. So, you know, it had to have a label, but before it had a label, I mean, these kinds of things have been going on forever in my experience in the industry.
Yeah, that's so true. Before the name cyber got stuck to, or a moniker got stuck to the whole industry, I think, you know, we had information security, IT security, enterprise security, computer security, data security. I mean, name it, right? So much of security in front of it.
Yeah, but a critical issue, and I suspect your audience would appreciate this as well, and you've heard me say this before, and that is that my experience has been that anybody's any good with a computer is incapable of having a meaningful relation with another human. And what I mean by that more than anything else is we in the IT world we're not good communicators. And so I think one of the problems we've had, particularly with information security, is when an IT person, a CISO or CTO or whatever, they don't communicate very effectively with management, no matter where it is, anywhere in the world. This is just a problem endemic to the IT industry. And it causes problems, I think, in being sure exactly what is being meant. And so I regularly, routinely harass my clients about that. Matter of fact, I'm in the middle of a very large project I'm negotiating, and I made that comment to my client, who's a CIO, and he laughed. He says, actually, my undergraduate degree's in English, so that's not a problem I have. I know how to communicate, but that is an issue worldwide, I think, with IT people, is that they tend to use lingo and buzzwords.
Very true. And they have changed the lingo too. Like I think the Webster dictionary right now has more newer words related to computer than it is. And we start talking to computers, and then we stop talking to people.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because what I have seen over time is that the technology really has not changed all that much in my experience in the industry of more than 40 years, but there are new labels that are put on things, and that you have to adapt to the new label because that's what everybody refers to. Like, for instance, cloud computing. That's been around since 2006 when Google coined the expression. But you and I both know it started in 1964 in Dartmouth University, called time sharing. And the only difference is remote access via telephone line or over the internet, but technically it's not real different.
That's right.
But cloud is cooler.
Looks like marketing people have done a better job than security people.
Yes, I think, well, hey, like Google, they know how to market stuff just like Amazon does, you know?
Well, all right. I know, looking back, I think, you know, you started way early in this business, and protecting customers and their data, and defending them when needed, representing them. Did you see the type of cybercrime we are seeing now coming back then, and how far back do you see?
Oh, I would say it's been around, as far as I know, it's been around my entire experience dealing with computers. I think the part of the problem has been remote, and now we're back to the cloud, because I think that is a big problem. When everything was on-prem, it was more of a different phenomenon because getting in was more difficult.
Right.
But now that, and I have no idea what the percentage of cloud use is versus on-prem, but if you just think back 10 years, virtually everything was on-prem and a very small percentage cloud, and now it's the other way around. Well, I think we're more vulnerable when the servers are owned by Amazon and Microsoft and everybody else that's in that space. So I think the cloud world has really made it more complicated because just by way of example, I had a very large client that years ago, we would call it ransomware now, or an attempted ransomware. And somebody broke into their ERP system on-prem and threatened that if they didn't pay them a large amount of money, that they would disable their system. So the CIO just went in and solved the problem online, on-prem, and nothing ever happened. And we just kind of laughed about it. But it was really a threat that in today's world, we find out that we're shut down and then we have to do something about it. But, 10 or 15 years ago, when it wasn't on a cloud, I think it was different. So I hadn't thought about it quite that way, but I do think the cloud has a lot to do with all of this.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You probably remember the way we met was Cloud Security Alliance, right? That was Harold and my deal, and just we brought that to North Texas, and at that time we were like the outliers, and now it seems like the thing. Everybody's moving to cloud if they haven't already, right?
Well, but one of the reasons for it, and I'll give a positive because I have clients that are in that business too. If you can protect in the cyber world things in a stronger environment on the cloud, it may be less expensive than you having to find those resources to do them on-prem. Because, well, here's one of the bottom line issues that endemic to our industry, and that is there aren't enough cybersecurity people around the world. This is not. I saw numbers that NIST came up with last year. I think there's an expectation that we're going to be short more than 1 million IT professionals around the world within a couple of years. And that makes a problem because then how do you manage it? You have to rely on the small percentage of people that are there, and available.
Right. Now you're touching on my favorite topic when it comes to developing cyber capacity and talent, but it's interesting now with this pandemic, everybody's working remote. You and I are not going back to the office. We just talked about that. And I think it will be perpetuated for quite some time that we will be working remotely, collaborating remotely, and we'll go back to work to meet people when we have to. And that brings the focus and the demand, I believe, for cybersecurity professionals for securing those remote connections to a different level altogether, right? If there's
it's changed the dynamic. And then let's add into that to make it a little more complicated. And I don't mean this in a political setting. So let's not, we have a presidential election going on here in the US, but I don't want it to be political. And that is when we see state actors doing things on behalf of their country, like for instance, China, just kind of randomly throwing that out there. That's a different dynamic that I don't think we used to have that at the same risk, because I speak quite a bit, 30, 40 times a year. And one of the reports that surfaces to the top always is the vulnerability that we have with our public utility system, water and power. And this is not just in the US, this is a worldwide problem. Because it's critical. Let's put it like this. I didn't have internet access in my house last Thursday because my provider got knocked down for some reason or other. That's pretty devastating if you think about it. You don't have internet access, or let's say you didn't have electricity for a day or two or a week or two. I mean, it would be unbelievable. If we lost all the electric utilities in the United States or in one state tomorrow because of some cyber attack, what is the economic consequence of that? Forget the political side. It's amazing.
Right. And it's very interesting that people still think this is sci-fi. It is not. It's actually possible because the vulnerabilities of the grid and the vulnerabilities of the supply system and the instrumentation of that and the technologies, basically the industrial control system is all been manufactured in a way or been plugged in there for quite some time. And we talk about, and while I don't want to encourage the fact, but I think there are sleeper cells out there which could be woken up. Absolutely. And that's what we're seeing in the IT scenarios where ransomware variants which were available earlier and thought to be already quashed are kind of raising their heads. That means that it could happen in other situations, especially on the industrial and critical infrastructure sector as well. So that
Yeah,
would
no,
be fascinating.
it's kind of a frightening prospect. And I think the fact that we are so dependent on these utilities makes the vulnerability critical. But, you know, like, for instance, just by way of example, because I had a lawsuit on it, it's not a private information, but I had a client that was using a disaster recovery as a service outfit. Now, and I'm not going to name names, but they had a problem. And we ended up, the hospital had no access to its healthcare system for 27 hours.
Mhm.
I mean, and that wasn't intentional. That was an accident. So if somebody intentionally did that, it could be devastating if a whole hospital system was knocked out for any significant length of time. It's life and death.
Right, right, absolutely. And this has become so much part of our life and everything that we depend on, and the ways we collaborate, or even, as you mentioned, healthcare. Each sector has its own vulnerabilities or exposures, so to speak. But now I think with the digital transformation, which is an overused word again, has become more and more overexposed. So, well, let's get into a little bit, the meat of what you do in your exciting life of helping clients to serve around privacy, cybersecurity, intellectual property. One of the topics that I've been always curious about, and I think you deal with it on a pretty much daily basis, is the due diligence that's done on an M&A, right? Because mergers and acquisitions are kind of the bread and butter of business, right? You grow, you acquire, you organically, even if you organically grow, you're acquiring suppliers and services. So what's your take on the due diligence that need to be provided for or done for mergers and acquisitions of any scale, the baseline fundamentals?
Yeah, well, you know, in the merger and acquisition world, the people that conduct those transactions include lawyers, accountants, consultants in whatever the industry is. But rarely, what I find is rarely are there people involved in it that have cyber experience. So they don't even know what to ask for. So what I have found in the past few years is when I have a client that is purchasing another company, I routinely include in the list of information we want. I want to know SOC testing, what clouds are being used for different purposes, PCI compliance, all kinds of things that I think are bread and butter to running businesses, because you don't want to be buying a disaster. And I think you and I discussed this the other day. I had a client that was buying an international franchisor, fast food franchisor. And a week before we were going to close, the seller disclosed to us that there had been a PCI intrusion that had been going on for 6 months, and not all, but virtually all the point of sale devices at their restaurants. And it was like, they didn't bother telling us. Well, my job, what happened was my partner who was doing this deal, he got a report from the PCI investigator, and he said, can you translate this to English? Because I don't have any idea what this says. And what we figured out was, we can't touch this with a 10-foot pole. We didn't buy the company. But what I'm saying is, if you don't know how to ask the right question, you're going to get the kind of answer that you deserve. And that is, if you don't do all the validation of, let's say, SOC 1 audits or whatever it is that you need to validate, then that's really very critical, I think.
Well, I think that's crucial to the success of that merger or acquisition. If you are buying a business, as you mentioned, and you are pretty much 99% into the deal, and then all of a sudden you're asking questions that should have been asked like 6 months back when the thing started, right? I think timing is also important when you are
It is, yeah. So like, for instance, I had a client that was buying an international technology company. And so what I did to try and figure out how they operated was, I got a copy of the biggest contract they had with a well-known vendor that everybody on, one of the big credit card companies. And I went through that, and I just picked out every single warranty that they were making to the credit card company. And I said, substantiate and prove this to me.
Yeah.
It took them a while to do it, but at least I validated that they had done their homework. And until they did that, we had no way of knowing for sure that they really had the kind of security, let alone insurance, in place to do that.
Well, that's that's sad when that happens, but it happens more often to
It
be
happens all the time, I'm afraid.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think in terms of systemic changes we need to make? I mean, you've been part of the Texas Bar Association. You have led the association for probably the longest time. What do you think the legal community needs to do? Because they are inevitably they are involved, right? As accountants are involved, the legal teams are involved 9 or 10 times.
Yeah, and one of your leaders, Sean Tuma, is a longtime friend of mine, and this year, starting in June, he became chair of the computer and technology section for the state bar. And his leadership, you have somebody who's a cyber specialist like Sean, is a really great sign, I think, about how your organization, Cyber Future Foundation, is having an imprint on the legal community. But so just way back when, and it kind of hurts my head a little bit to say this, but 30 years ago, I was the founding chair of the computer technology section in 1990. And as I reported to the section last month, when I went to the state bar board of directors in 1990 and said, we need to create this computer section, they had no idea what we were talking about. And the funny part was we had done a survey.
I'm surprised it was even there.
Well, but you got to think about it. We did a survey. My committee had done a survey for the state bar. In 1989, fewer than 44% of the lawyers in the state of Texas use computers. Wow. So what is it today? 99.999, 5 nines at least,
yes,
right?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of it is we're all dependent. And, a point you made earlier, I think is important. Work from home, COVID-19 is now driving people to be more sensitive to some of these things than they've ever been before.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think that's absolutely crucial. Well, let's talk about the evolving scenarios too, right? I mean, earlier it was more about intellectual property, and then it was about computer hacking. I think for the longest time that rule.
That was the label. Let's say that
the label that was stuck there, right?
Right.
And then
yeah.
I think as the usage and the exposure of computers and end user computing is becoming more and more prevalent with the consumers, the effect and the concerns around privacy have been growing, right? So you see this, I believe, in your transactions all the time.
Yeah.
But what do you think as the regulatory frameworks of privacy expanding with GDPR at the outset, and now with CCPA and several others coming in the tow? What's the effect?
Well, I think that one of the fundamental issues dealing with privacy that most people don't consider is my experience has been, as I travel around over the years, that I always take a show of hands of how many people read terms of service, privacy policy, and click agreement. And I would say it's less than 1%. So I think people don't take responsibility for understanding what privacy they are giving up. Like, let's say, all of us that use Google Maps, let's say, we do that because it's convenient and it helps us understand what is the traffic. But in the meantime, we're giving the GPS data to Google to do with whatever they want. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just part of the reality. But what I think has made this more complicated is in dealing with privacy, because it makes it impossible to understand. By the end of the year, the expectation is there will be 31 billion Internet of Things. So if we can't protect and manage 31 billion things and the privacy associated with them, I just don't think it's possible. As a matter of fact, I did see by 2025, there's an expectation it'll be up to 75 billion Internet of Things. And how do you manage that? How is it possible? Matter of fact, California passed a law last year that went into effect this year that put a duty on companies that sold Internet of Things, whatever that may be, to have a cybersecurity component. I don't know how you enforce that given billions. Yeah. If it was like 1,000, okay, maybe, but 31 billion by the end of the year, say it's not possible. And privacy is tied into that because the Federal Trade Commission brought a lawsuit a couple of years ago against a company that made baby cams and said they had no security. Well, that's pretty disturbing. I think most of us who have children or grandchildren and we use a baby cam, we don't expect a privacy compromise. We expect to be protected and our children to be protected.
Yeah, yeah. There is an expectation that you, as a service provider, already providing the basic guarantees of privacy. I think it also goes hand in hand with the consumer behavior, right? I mean, if you are a consumer, you're not reading through the online legal terms and services, privacy policies. I mean, all that is an overwhelming amount of information to get a service that you want or you're paying for. So I think somebody has to guarantee that, and that's where probably you're going.
But the other component that goes along with this is because the storage of data today is so inexpensive.
That's right.
We have big data, and between the privacy protection in big data and artificial intelligence, which is kind of plugged into the middle of it, there's no guarantee that the data is accurate. There are no laws that require that the data aggregators do anything to validate the data. So if you plug into that privacy in addition to everything else, I want to know, for instance, I routinely use a technology called Spokio if I'm trying to find somebody somewhere. Well, it's amazing to me how many people really don't care about their privacy. It's like, I do, you do, probably everyone who is involved in CFF cares about privacy, but millions of people do not. And I think the younger generation tends to not be there as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is generational, and as you see, younger generation, I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on a younger generation because they're driving and the future is bright and all. But I think there is a lesson learned in the last even 5 years or so when social media, kind of emerged as the big distributor and orchestrator of public data. Because everybody used to just share, and still is. I think it is still growing. The awareness of people of what that data would mean or could mean in future, or even in the immediate, next few moments when everybody's a click away from becoming famous. So I think people don't really care. But I think there has been I'll say they don't care until they have to. Right, when something happens to them, it's too late probably to be tracked. I think GDPR's right to forget was an essential element stuck in there because of that. Because people will be, people will change, they will flex, they will have remorse, but once you have done that, it's difficult to unwind from that, right? So privacy laws.
Well, it's funny you say that, but the ruling that led to the first exercise of the right to be forgotten was an individual in Madrid, Spain, who had declared bankruptcy. Wow. And 10 years later,
I'm not surprised that.
Yeah. So 10 years later, Google was reporting the guy had declared bankruptcy. So he went to enforce it against Google in the EU courts, and he won that Google had to remove him about his bankruptcy. But the Madrid newspaper that had the same story, they could publish it. He couldn't stop that. The nutty part, see what I'm saying is it's kind of all relative. Okay, locally, because that was news at the time, it's still news in Madrid, It's kind of funny how that works,
observation. And I think, it's like, you'll have selective memory always, the good times you want to, emphasize and re-emphasize. But if you have done something bad in the past, you want to scrub that off, and that scrubbing has come to this, right? So I think the privacy regulations have a lot to improve on, and as probably a starting point GDPR was, but now it's CCP. I think it's a completely different take on it, right?
Yeah, but here we've got to look at it from this perspective. The EU GDPR that went into effect in 2018 was an update from that 1995 data directive in terms of privacy. The individuals in EU could go to any computer, change the data if it was wrong, or the right to be forgotten, as you pointed out. Unfortunately, that wasn't enforced very effectively in the member states. So that's why GDPR came along. It now has an enforcement worldwide, but the courts around the world have not adopted it. I still believe, I don't know a single judge in the United States that would agree that GDPR applies in this country. So we have to see what are the courts going to do before we really determine how that's going to go, because I think that will impact privacy laws in other countries, because it's not just the EU. This is privacy all over the world. There are many privacy laws in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're all over the place.
Yeah. Well,
Germany is my dad.
Absolutely, yeah. When it comes to data security and the laws that kind of govern that, there's also a retraction of the safe harbor recently. That did you see any effect of that on the
there?
M&A?
Yeah, it actually, there was a ruling that came out a couple of months ago that has kind of flipped the whole notion of how we share things between the EU and the US. That's been going in different directions for years. I mean, unfortunately, I'd like to say it's simple. I think it's getting more complicated.
That's right.
I have clients that operate around the world, and so we have to be very cautious about how we help them manage those privacy expectations. But that you're right, that the court ruling that just came out really kind of flipped the GDPR and US relationship in a very interesting way. And it remains to be seen how that's going to play out. That's another thing.
That's right.
Courts do things that are historical. That's one of the reasons I was so interested in law, was they don't do things for the future. They do things that happened in the past. And when I'm in court fighting about something, I'm fighting about history. I'm not fighting about the future.
You're looking at precedent. You're looking up laws and
right.
the terms that are given out. Well,
not to mention one other factor, which I think everyone observing will note. Most of the judges around the world, not just in the US, they don't know anything about cyber and technology. This is all alien to the way they operate. So they have to learn it in order to be able to rule on such things. It's not simple.
It's very interesting when the most technologically inclined people are struggling, right? I mean, because not everybody is a cyber professional, and it's hard to stomach that we live in a connected world, but so much it is to be done to raise the awareness, decrease the complexity, increase the plain speak in cyber. So I think this would be another probably a motivation. I mean, when it comes to criminal or cyber or civil affairs, that we need to be, we need everyone to be cyber savvy, and it cannot happen until it becomes simple. We have to make it simple.
Right. No, I agree completely. Yeah.
So, and I know that not the last topic here, but so we got so much on the list. But I think one of the things that I really wanted to discuss with you or get your thoughts on is about cyber insurance, and we have had this topic for quite some time. How do you see that shaping up over the last 18 months that we have been talking about?
Well, let me put it this way: without regard to just cyber, let's talk about insurance for a minute. The insurance industry has historically based how much the premiums cost and how much they're going to pay on experience that they have. So the example I like to use is, if I wanted to get insurance on riding, let's say, a bicycle, there are hundreds of years of experience knowing what could go wrong with a bicycle or a motorcycle for that matter, okay? But what we don't know is we don't have a lot of history in the cyber world for the insurance companies to know how much they charge, how much should they pay off, one thing or another. And as the courts start ruling on whether they should pay, we are seeing a change. And so there's been a morphing of the cyber coverage. And what I'm afraid of is, and I think most people watching would agree, is it's getting more expensive and it's less likely we're going to pay when something goes wrong. And my friends in this industry, the funny thing is, one of the major insurance companies told me a while back, when they have a new potential insured for cyber insurance, what they do, the first thing they do is they interview the board members. The less the board members know, the higher the premiums.
Oh gosh,
well, think about it.
That starts somewhere, right? So what a way to do
right.
it. You know about your risks and your business risk. You also know about your cyber risk.
And you know what? That makes a lot of sense, actually. So what's happening is there are more and more boards, particularly public companies, that are insisting that they have at least one board member who is cyber savvy, which I think helps you support that you want to educate those people so that they will know how to ask the right questions of management to make sure they've got the right kind of cyber insurance coverage.
Yeah, I mean, still there are more and more policies now being sold on cyber insurance. I know there are more and more claims being made, and there are so many in public courts already, right, fighting it out.
But part of the problem, I'm negotiating a big international ERP deal right now, and the language that the vendor, the implementer includes is very simple and just says cyber tech coverage. What does that mean? I mean, that's not cyber intrusion. It's not theft of data. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is the specificity of the kind of coverage is very important.
Very true, very true. Do you see that the cyber insurance in general being as effective a risk mitigation tool as any other business risk mitigation tools?
No, because it's a moving target. It's back to that example I was using about history on bicycles.
Yeah.
Insurance has hundreds of years of knowledge of what could go wrong with a bicycle, so they know what kind of coverage to write. As we are in a period where the cyber criminals are attacking us in a new creative way next week, the insurance from last week doesn't cover next week. And so we're missing that because they don't have the history of what could go wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. And I think it has also become a tempting tool for, cyber adversaries, so to speak, that they can go get paid, right? Because if they can have ransomware somewhere, then they know that cyber insurance will pick it up and they will get paid.
Right, right. And of course, the other part of that is the FBI recommends not paying ransom because number one, there's no guarantee the data is going to be unencrypted. But number two, which may be worse, is then you have a target on your back that you paid a ransom. Yeah. So it's a catch-22. And if the insurance pays it or will pay the ransom, then you're the one with the target on the back, not the insurance company. I mean, it's kind of a nutty circumstance.
Yeah, and we are seeing that I think not just in large businesses but also smaller businesses, so which is like, a smaller business gets hit by a ransomware. If the tip, 99% of the time they don't have any coverage, so they will eventually have to kind of rebuild their business themselves, and it's increasingly getting more and more difficult for them to get the services they need, because the cost is also growing from both sides, as cyber insurance policy as well as this service.
Well, and in that regard, I'll tell you, if you ask the FBI about what they know on this topic, they say that many businesses go out of existence because of these ransomware, because the criminals are now attacking smaller enterprises with 250 or fewer employees,
right?
And they can't recover.
Yeah, so I'd like to close this with some sort of takeaway in terms of both talent, because this is a society of mentors, and you are a distinguished master mentor. So any and all advice that you give for people to go into this cybersecurity as a career, or take up cybersecurity as a career, will be very useful. But you, again, with your interesting background of having a computer science major and going into law and kind of getting to see this dual perspective of the world, what are your thoughts around people who want to transition into cybersecurity as a career?
Well, I'm a big proponent, and I think your organization is a great vehicle as a way to kind of help get people intrigued. Part of the problem with it is, the cyber industry, as I pointed out earlier, is that there are so many opening opportunities for jobs in this space, and there just aren't enough people qualified to fill those jobs. It's really kind of a devastating cycle that we're in now, because the cyber criminals are way ahead of us. And so I think the sooner the better that colleges and universities around the world offer programs in cybersecurity, because that's really the way to get it going, is you get the students, this kind of baseline. Like I said before, I started writing programs because I got involved in a class that had nothing to do with programming. It was statistics, but it intrigued me. And I think we need to get more students involved in this and intrigued by cyber.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and then kind of a lot of reinforcement of what we have been doing. To share with you a great news we have this week is that our initiative Sci Jobs in partnership with Shuffle Partners, with Mukta Pandit, who's been leading Shuffle and the Sci Jobs initiatives. We announced this in Davos, and within 6 months, now 9 months, we got the DOL's contract for building the US cybersecurity apprenticeship program, which is phenomenal for us.
That's great. Wonderful. Glad to hear that. I wasn't aware of all that. All those details.
Be a great resource for us to kind of drive the cyber capacity forward. So, I mean, we can't wait to announce it in the broader world. We're waiting for DOL to announce first, but that'll be fascinating coming in just before the summit.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's great news.
Excellent. So, well, let's have a quick, let me see if I can get Harold into this program so that we can have a quick chat. And you know, Harold, as you know, is very interested in this initiative that we talked about, you know, driving forward the International Center for Cyber Arbitration and Mediation, right? And Harold, can you hear us? Or can you speak? Maybe
you're on mute, though, Harold.
There you go.
I can hear you now.
All right.
Hey, great. Hey, Harold.
Awesome to see you, Peter. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, and thanks for including me in this program. I'm honored to be part of it.
Well, we have so many initiatives coming forward. Val mentioned about the Sci Jobs, and we've got some things that we're not ready to discuss right now, but the International Center for Cyber Arbitration and Mediation, which you're certainly a part of, we think is going to be very, very play a central role in some of the things that that Val is working on right now. So just a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Harold. I appreciate that. And, you know, you guys kind of the ones that kind of invited me in, but I've been just really very pleased to be part of your foundation and provide, you know, my comments and thoughts and whatever I can do to help you guys. You know that I'm here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Brother Harold. Well, so this brings us to the end of this week's program, and we can't wait to get to the summit. There are only a few weeks left. So those for those who are joining in late and also tuning into this later, as we can realize, like there is back-to-back Zoom, and it will go from one session to the other. Please register at cyberfuturesummit.com. We have an exciting lineup coming up, and that includes Peter, so you will get to hear from him again. There are a lot of developments happen that through that entire 6 months. I cannot tell you how productive these 6 months have been for us. So we are looking forward to, you know, bring all that together to the summit. There'll be probably around 120 speakers this year spread over a period of 3 days, 2.5 days to be precise. About 50 hours of programming, 10 national cybersecurity hours. This is unique. I don't think anybody does this like the way we have planned to. And it's going to be, you know, all the 10 countries that we have actually spent the most amount of time in the last 5 years. And don't forget, this is our 5th anniversary year. This is a big deal for us to look into what we have done and what we could do in the next 5 years to come. And of course, many, many years with the support and contribution of friends and supporters like Peter and the others that you have seen in the CFF Live show. This society of mentors that we have built is totally available for people to tap in. This conversations that we have had with our friends, Peter and our colleagues are always available to you. We have also put together what we're calling a lesson from session, because we realize that busy professionals don't have the time to sit down, maybe have 45 minutes to themselves to look through these sessions, which is what I welcome, absolutely. But I think we need quick takeaways that we can go, you know, quickly put into action. So you will have these sessions transcribed and the takeaways provided. There are 5 already online at cyberfuturefoundation.org. If you go to our summit page, or if you go to our online page, you will see the one from George Finis that we did. The first one is already available. There are other pages going to be available, and we'll put this session out too. The YouTube session is being, our link is being updated pretty frequently. So this session will be available for you and those that are going to tune in later. But what a pleasure talking to you, Peter. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing and all your support for the years that we have worked together.
Thank you so much, Val and Harold. Wonderful to be part of this program with you. It's a great honor. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All have a great rest of the day. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Peter. Looking forward to the
Thanks.
summit.
Yeah, and look forward to see you soon. Take care.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.